you weren't born in the United States. And that means that according to the laws that we have in this country, there's certain parameters on who can and cannot run for president. And if you were not born in the United States, now that could be debated on whether or not that should be the case, but it is the case at this point, and you cannot run for president, or you cannot be president if you were not born in the country, and yet you're running for president. And so I want to ask you about that and what you're doing with the campaign donations then that you're collecting on this campaign that ultimately, if you were to win, you couldn't actually take office.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Kim. So first of all, that's false. So let's go through that. First of all, it's a very important discussion that needs to be had. Most of everything I've done has always been to educate people, and we'll talk more about that. But Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 of the Articles, which was done in 1787, there's a couple of things people need to understand in history class. First of all, the Constitution is a living document. Amendments change previous things. So if you follow Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, which is the qualifications of president, by the way, it refers to he. According to, if you follow that by the letter of the law, a woman cannot be president. But we know the 19th Amendment was passed. But Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 talks about the qualifications of president. You have to be 35 years old. You have to be natural born, which the founders, interestingly enough, never defined. And then the next thing it talks about is you have to be a resident in the United States at a certain time. Interesting enough, the Maryland legislature made Marquis de Lafayette, who was never born in the United States, and all of his heirs a natural born citizen. You can go do your research on that. Now, you go to the fact that the Bill of Rights came. So the First Amendment, all those important rights came. And then we had the 14th Amendment, which was probably one of the most fundamental amendments that was passed, as important, you could argue, as the Bill of Rights, which is the Equal Protection Clause. So when you go to the Equal Protection Clause, it clearly says a naturalized citizen cannot be distinguished from a natural born citizen. You cannot have two levels of citizenry. So since that passing over 100 years ago, there have been many, many court rulings where people brought up the fact how a naturalized citizen was being discriminated as a natural born. And the courts have overwhelmingly, consistently said that you cannot do this. It's a violation of the 14th Amendment. Now, what's occurred, if you look at the history of this law, the FEC in 2011, a guy called Hassan, wanted to get on the ballot in New Hampshire. Now, this looks like he was trying to do a money-making venture when you actually look at it, not about really running for office. So he wanted to get presidential matching funds. The New Hampshire Secretary of State said, I can't put you on the ballot because you're not natural born. And again, the secretaries of state need to be educated. But the FEC, which is the governing body, really the agency on this, interesting enough, ruled after that, and naturalized citizens can run for president, in fact, can collect donations, but they left out the presidential matching funds. So in court rulings, there's a very, very important principle called agency deference. Huge body of law that have been done on that. Agency deference says that a court, even a Supreme Court justice, must defer to the agency to being the subject matter expertise, the SME on it. So FEC is their subject matter expertise. So by the law, A, I can run, and B, I can collect donations. Now, we have filed what's called a declaratory relief with Merrick Garland. We've sued Merrick Garland and Gary Thompson on 2 counts. First of all, is that by the law, not only can I run, but also be president. And this is an educational process that needs to be taking place. And so the declaratory relief, which we filed in DC about a month ago, tells the courts to order, no different than Brown versus Board of Education, the courts to order Merrick Garland to inform all the states, because we live in a republic, each state can decide ultimately the requirements for ballot access. In Massachusetts, for example, you have to collect 10,000 signatures. In Vermont, you have to collect 1,000 signatures. And when you collect those signatures, and they may have other requirements, you may have to have electors and you may have to have X number of meetings. So we want the courts to order Merrick Garland to tell all the Secretary of States when our volunteers, and we have about a couple 100,000 already all over the United States, when they collect signatures and they submit, preemptively, if they do that, that's a violation of the Constitution. So that's what we've done.
There's going to be a lot of people who are going to push back on this idea. If it is the case that a naturalized citizen and not natural born could actually hold office. Now, I agree you could run for office, you could collect donations, but that's different than actually then being allowed to take office once you win, if you were to win. And there would be a lot of pushback on this because we all lived through the birthergate, the Obama birth certificate saga, where it was, where was he really born?
Yeah.
Oh, he was born in Kenya, and so he could not be president. I mean, there was millions upon millions of people who believed that Barack Obama was not born in the United States and therefore could not actually be eligible to hold office. So what would you say to all of the people who fought that, even Donald Trump himself, for all those years?
Yeah, look, first of all, a lot of these people probably are smoking weed and didn't really study the Constitution. Just because someone on the right or the left says that the sun rises on the east doesn't mean they're wrong. So let's take the sort of general philosophical perspective. First of all, I haven't looked at Obama's birth certificate or not, so I haven't had the chance to do that investigation. But I can tell you that Obama, if he was indeed born somewhere else, he should have taken this head on, because the 14th Amendment makes it absolutely unconstitutional constitutional to deny me the right to be president. Now, Paul Clark is one of the leading legal scholars in the country on this, and Paul has written a wonderful legal review on this. And the 3 points that we've argued in our court suit is, first of all, the First Amendment says any political speech is the most protected form of speech. So my running for office, I should be able to run. Number 2, the 14th Amendment was really established for the states. But Bowling versus Green extended that back at the federal level to the 5th Amendment, which is due process. So the law is there. And then another very important principle is called let the political process decide. And this is something even the legal scholars who thought that this was wrong said, yeah, let the political process decide. But fundamentally, relative to Obama, I think he claimed he was a constitutional lawyer. So if he was in fact born somewhere else, he should have argued it. So yes, I will be doing some innovation here, breaking ground as I've always had to do throughout my entire life on everything I've had to do to struggle to get what I've gotten. Look, if Merrick Garland doesn't do it, it'll go to the appeals court and we'll win in the Supreme Court. It's black and white on this issue. The preponderance of case law clearly saying that a naturalized citizen and a natural born citizen cannot be discriminated has been over and over adjudicated in the courts.
I think that
an educational process. Well, it's going to be some people who say, well, we don't want that guy coming in from out in another country, an Arab or whatever. They'll say something discriminatory. We don't want Saddam Hussein's brother being the president of the United States. Now, you have to understand when this was all created, it was done at a time when the United States was a fledgling nation. They didn't want a prince coming in and overtaking the government. But you could argue the natural born citizens like Joe Biden, there's a lot of so-called people who claim that they're natural born and are patriots, have in fact sold out this country to foreign nations. So we live in a very, very different world. You could also argue philosophically that naturalized citizens perhaps may be even more patriotic to this country than people who sit on their rumpus and have forgotten what it means, what the First and Second Amendments really mean.
I mean, I see both sides of that for sure. I mean, my mother is a refugee from Vietnam. And so I grew up with a bunch of Vietnamese people. Some of them had become American citizens. Some of them have not. I understand there's an argument on both sides of that on who's more of a citizen. I agree that we probably should not be living in a country that gives second-class citizenship to naturalized citizens versus natural-born citizens. But I would say that even though naturalized citizens often work hard, love this country because they came here under dire circumstances, they also still have an affinity for home. I think everybody has an affinity for home. Even I do. You know, I don't want to move back to Idaho, but I love Idaho. It's my home state. It's where I grew up. You know, I think people naturally love home, where they grew up, where their roots are. And so there is just that natural affinity. And so what I think the fear in why there's this idea that it's only natural born citizens who could be president of the United States is because you don't want a president who is going to have that nostalgia and love and affinity for a foreign country that very well could end up being hostile. It would be a conflict of interest. And I could understand that. I mean, we see the conflicts of interest with like Joe Biden and Burisma and Hunter Biden. And it's why is that? Why does that matter?
Or a lot of people from Ireland. There's people from Ireland and Boston who have a greater love for Ireland in some ways than here. It goes across the board.
And
so you
Israel, you've got a lot of people who love Israel, probably more so than the United States.
Well, not only that, in the case of Israel, you're actually allowed to have dual citizenship, which I'm opposed to. And an American citizen can fight in the Israeli army. And that's even more dangerous. I think the real issue I think you're bringing up, Kim, is a fascinating question. I've thought about it is what does it mean to be a citizen? And to me, it's about service. You know, what does it mean to have you done stuff for this country? You know, you look at your long history. What have you done for the United States? What have you actually done? So you could be President Joe Biden and you scammed the United States and you did all these deals to do it for selfishness. Does that make you a citizen? You know, there's some philosophical issues. I believe that this issue of the 14th Amendment, we're going to win on that. And it's going to fundamentally give a whole nother pool of very, very extraordinary people who should run for president, like myself and your mom and everyone else. But the issue comes down to what is citizenship? You know, what does it mean to be a citizen anymore?
And that's a really good question because we do have a big battle in this country about immigrants coming in, illegal immigrants coming in, working here. And then there's this, well, they shouldn't be citizens. And I've often said the same thing. If you are contributing to this country, if you are building healthy neighborhoods, businesses, you're working hard, you should have the right to become a citizen of the country if you are working and you intend to stay here, you intend to continue building here. You're not planning on building here and then taking your resources and money and going somewhere else and building another country with it. I agree with that. I think we do need to redefine what makes a person a citizen in this country. I think it would be a big, large debate. That's a huge thing to tackle is whether or not somebody who's just born to an American citizen on foreign soil automatically gets American citizenship. Should that be the case? Or somebody who just comes here and is born here and then leaves. I know a lot of people who come here, they're born here, their parents bring them here. They're wealthy people from other countries. They come to America just to birth their babies here, only to then take them back to Turkey or Russia or China or Europe and raise them. And so we should have a
I've
conversation about what is a citizen and redefining, should we have this sort of birthright citizenship or should we do it based on other things? And I think it should be based on contribution to the country.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to me, the slogan I have is service is citizenship. So if you look at someone flies here, comes to New York, has their kid, and then goes back and never comes back to the United States, they can be a president, right?
Right.
And then someone comes here, creates email and generates value for a multi-trillion-dollar economy, gets NIH and NSF grants and contributes and writes papers and has been here 40 years. The absolute constitutional position of the 14th Amendment says you cannot have second-class citizens. So that's the point on my becoming president. But there is a deeper issue of there's people sitting in this country who take advantage of this country too. We're quote-unquote natural born again, which was never defined by the founders. Maybe we need to ratchet up what it means to be a citizen. Do you serve after high school? Do you participate in the army? Do you do some type of service project for 2 to 3 years? What are you contributing on an ongoing basis to advance the United States economy? Obviously, I do not think people should be able to have dual citizenship and be able to maintain U.S. citizenship. So there's a lot of very profound things I think our campaign is going to bring up. And obviously the first reaction, no, you can't be president according to that. Well, it's not true. So we can have the legal argument on that. But there's this broader argument, which I hope for this discourse that we actually have. What does it mean to be an American and to really love this country?
Well, you're not alone you're not alone in the controversy of whether or not somebody who is not born in the United States could be president. I mean, we do have, like, for example, Ted Cruz. There's questions on Ted because he was born in Canada. John McCain, who was born in Panama. He was born on a military base, wasn't he, in Panama?
He was born on a military base, but that's where it gets interesting, right?
Right, because they claimed that was American soil, essentially, that he was still born in American soil because he's born on an American base, but in a foreign country. And so he was allowed to run for president.
Yeah, there's been this huge argument, if you go back to British common law, that goes all back just soli, which means join on soil, and just sanguine, which means your bloodlines. But that's why the 14th Amendment is so powerful, because it basically said, you know what? A naturalized citizen, natural born citizens are absolutely equal. We cannot have 2 tiers of citizens. So just on that basis, the Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 is abrogated by that. And not only is it a powerful argument, but it's de facto already decided. It's just no one has asserted it. So in many ways, I'm asserting it. That's what I'm doing. So it's going to be fascinating what occurs at every state level, because as we start handing in the signatures, since we already have the lawsuit filed, we may have to do some PIs, preliminary injunction, when that occurs. And that's going to bring up some fascinating issues. It's going to be a great learning experience at minimum, including the Secretaries of State.
And maybe you can get some defining rulings on that. The Supreme Court has never weighed in on that particular issue. And like you said, there's a lot of case law that backs up the case, the strength of the case, if it ultimately got to that point. But I don't think you'll be the last on this. I mean, as we just mentioned with John McCain, Ted Cruz, there was also Barry Goldwater, who was born in Arizona when it was a territory and not actually a state. And there's questions of that. What happens if we make an area a state? But is everybody who were born there, are they no longer eligible to become president of the United States until they start having children? And it takes a couple of generations before someone from that territory that is now a state could become president. So there's a lot of questions there, and absolutely wish the best of luck to you on that. So where can people find more of the topics that you talk about? I mean, you do bring up a lot about a variety of different people, a variety of different issues. So where can they find you?
So Kim, they can go to shivaforpresident.com, and we really believe everyone should go there and get a little bumper sticker and put it on the back windshield. 100,000 people see it. The other thing, Kim, is that every Thursdays I do a town hall, shivaforpresident.com/town hall. And what I discover is this little diagram right here, and you can go there and you'll find it. We're taking the 6 issues: healthcare, environment, education, innovation, governance, and economy. And for each one of those, Kim, I actually have a solution. When people come to the town halls, I give them here and now. It's not like after I become president. Healthcare, we teach people how to boost their immune system. On innovation, we actually teach young kids the 7 secrets of innovation. Economy, we actually teach people what is a profit and loss statement, what is a balance sheet, how to save money. So our view is that the presidency is corrupt, the legislature is corrupt, the judiciary is corrupt. What would I do as president? Use that megaphone to unleash people doing bottoms-up movement. So shivaforpresident.com, shivaforpresident.com/town hall. Yeah, number 4.
President with the number
Shiva
4. Yeah.
4. And then finally, I've created a set of educational tools at truthfreedomhealth.com, where I want people to have the same knowledge that a Henry Kissinger got at Harvard or George Soros has with the science of systems. It's like Prometheus bringing fire to the earth. With this knowledge, people can really awaken how to solve problems. So truthfreedomhealth.com, shivaforpresident.com, again, numeral 4.
Dr. Shiva, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for all your great work. Thank you. Be well.